My thought was, let's look at opportunities as technology emerges on how we can do things differently. And the biggest by far was when the technology for video responses came out. I believe I was the first person at scale to send a video to every client every week. And I want that to be the industry standard, or beyond. But currently I think I'm just always looking for if I can provide a little extra value.
Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of The Birth of Industry. I'm not sure I have the chronology of this one right, but I did have to include Paul very, very close to the top, because just like Lane Norton was an early client of mine, Lane coached Paul. And the way I met Paul, I was speaking. Lane invited me to speak at his VIP camps he was having at the time in Florida. And at one of those camps, there was some training, modules where we would train with a couple people, as well as doing our lectures and workshops. And he paired me up with Paul, so we got to train together. And as a client of Lane's, Paul helped out with the camp. He ended up being, I think he's told this story more than once, but he was a van driver, and I found myself sitting in the front seat next to him a couple times. We really got to know each other. And as I think all of you know, just from either interacting with him or watching him from afar, Paul is just one of those people who is so authentic and such a good human being that he just genuinely cares. And I wish it was not as rare as it is, but when you find that in a peer where you could have competitive rivalries, you could have, different factions and so forth, you're just never going to find a guy who cares less about that stuff and more for his clients, more for his staff. And I would also say more for his friends. So I'm incredibly privileged to have connected with him so early. And I watched him start his business, his coaching career, and grow it to one of the biggest forces in the entire industry, and purely carrying it on his back just for the sake of one goal. And he's maintained this all the way through. I want to be the best coach in the world. And technically, I think the results speak for themselves. But anybody watching, if you're a competitor with a coaching relationship or a coach who looks for peer relationships, what a great lesson to learn. The way you succeed is to be a good human being. So I am, again, proud to say I had a chance to sit down with Paul and am just honored to share this interview with him. Enjoy. Paul Revelia. We have known each other how many years now?
I'm going to say 2009, 2008.
Everybody knows those dates. Not like me. I kind of just let those things go. I'm more in the moment.
I mean, I knew of you before I actually knew you, so I'm not counting the knowing you until we met at the Lane camp, I'm guessing.
Well, and what I want to talk about, this being our origin series, I'm putting together a chronology of who I think are some of the biggest voices in our industry and really lay a historical background for what I think people may not even realize about their own occupation. That it's pretty young. And so I look at you as one of the biggest influencers right now. And I know nobody likes that word, but I should say influence is in our sport. And you have such an interesting rise, because I did meet you at a camp in Florida. I was speaking, and what was your role at that particular camp?
I think if you had to define it, it was probably bus driver, airport pickup, gopher for lunches. And yeah.
Yeah, but as every great bodybuilding career starts, it was in baseball. And so let's go back to those years when you were just perhaps not even a teenager and you were involved in sports. What really got you into a physical or athletic life? What was it that said, man, I just love being active?
I mean, if I go back to my earliest memories, I remember in elementary school, they had this thing called the Presidential Physical Fitness Certificate. And it was like a mile run, pull-ups, I don't know. It was just all these random things that they said, this is what defines someone who's in good shape. And we would test it like once a year. And I would practice for that. I would be like, okay, I remember getting up before school, going downstairs and just doing as many pull-ups as I could do. Cause I think you had to do like 7, right? And then I would just go for a run every day after school and try to beat the time. It was like whatever, 10 minutes for the mile. And this was like 3rd, 4th grade. I don't remember the specifics, but that's the first time I remember thinking like, I'm kind of good at fitness. Cause I remember the teacher like calling me out and saying like, Paul won the pull-ups, Paul won the race, Paul won all the stuff. And I thought, I don't know, maybe it was good for my ego in 4th grade, but I was like, I got known as a fitness guy, even back then. And it wasn't fitness, but it was more like, I don't know, a calling card. I became a little bit obsessed with like those metrics.
So about the same time for me, but you were the guy that I hated. And so that motivated me. So imagine a chubby little Joe in the 4th grade, maybe even 5th, I think it was 4th though. And you're looking around and there's this Paul Revelia character, there's the quarterbacks, the football team. And you're like, wow, you're like, that's really something like something about, I'm sure it's the pre-puberty surge. Like you're just starting to notice these things that are different about the boys and the girls and whoever you're, trying to become. And so that was kind of the same start for me. And then we both ended up trickling mostly through baseball. Tell me how that career went, because you ended up pitching in college, I know.
Yeah. I mean, I was obsessive about baseball from about 3rd, 4th grade on. I wanted to go to all the spring training games. I grew up in Florida. I'm surrounded by thousands of baseball cards. I would go watch high school and games that I wasn't even a part of. I remember in Little League, my grandma would give me a pack of baseball cards for every strikeout I got. So like I would ask my dad to go in the backyard and catch me and bullpen me so I could like get better at striking people out. So I just remember like always wanting to kind of strive. In high school, my senior year, I was able to break our high school's strikeout record. I had an ERA in the low 1s. Like I had a really good senior season. Unfortunately, there was a kid who was in the junior class below me who also broke that record, who went on to play quarterback for Georgia Tech and was a Major League Baseball player for like 14 years. So he was the one that everyone noticed, but I was quietly a very good player. I ended up getting a baseball scholarship and did my time with that. But I didn't really have the foundations of how to work hard. I didn't understand what that meant in college. I got by on a lot of talent. I was obsessed with lifting weights, playing basketball. If I'd have put all that focus into baseball, I'm sure I could have, matriculated a little bit longer. But I ended up after, I graduated from Valdosta State, just thinking, okay, it's time to start a new life. I just saw where baseball was leading me. Okay. If I'm not going to be in the big leagues, I'm going to be a coach of a college, an assistant coach. It didn't get me excited. And I just cut it off and I just went and did other things in my life.
Yeah. Again, similar for me, but a little bit earlier. In Little League, for example, I was all-star catcher always, our team always won the city championship and all that, got into high school. And I also had somebody who was just, a little bit better than me, a little bit bigger in terms of a good blocker behind the plate. So I moved to third base, moved to center field. Similarly, but without the college scholarship, I just thought, this is not going to lead me anywhere. So I had to leave it behind. That's when I turned to weightlifting. I had been training since I was 11, 12 years old. That became a little bit more actual bodybuilding as a formal path. And just wondering when you started doing the same, when you decided, hey, I'm jumping in the gym here just for the sake of building muscle or strength.
Yeah. So it was between my junior and senior year of high school. I had obtained the book, The Modern Bodybuilding Encyclopedia by Arnold Schwarzenegger, which was, pretty healthy. My best friend got a pretty decent weight set in the upstairs of his house. It was like a bench, a squat rack, some of the dumbbells where you had to mix, you put the weights on and screw on the ends. But I just remember that summer, he and I would literally every day pick out a couple of the exercises and try to figure out how to do them. And then I just remember like one day we'd be doing an exercise and he'd be like, wow, look at the muscles in your quads. You can see them. I was always very lean. I'd never stopped moving. So the second I put on any muscle, you could see it. And so that kind of was exciting for me. And then I took weightlifting my senior year of high school. which a lot of the football players, they were in the 200 bench club, the 250 bench club, the 300 bench club. And I think I graduated high school benching about 175, like I was 6'2", 150 when I graduated high school. It was just a beanpole. But I don't know. I just always loved that ability to kind of shape your body a little bit. I was doing the best I could, didn't really understand nutrition too much, but for me, that's kind of what sparked it. And, obviously I think at least one girl that I knew had said something like, "Hey, have you been working out? You look like you're putting on some muscle." And that's when the wheels start turning. Right. So, and I think a lot of people get into it for that, but for me, that was just the beginning phase. And I didn't realize until later on in life that I was more interested in the actual weightlifting than the narcissism of it. Right. Like to this day, I have to work out. It's just like, makes me a better person.
Yeah. When was your first contest and how did that come about?
Yeah, that's a strange story because, well, I mean, maybe not strange for our era, but when I was growing up, there was only one division. It was called bodybuilding. And there was only one magazine you read. That was either Flex or like Muscle and Fitness. And all you saw was Jay Cutler, Ronnie Coleman, Flex Wheeler, Lee Priest. So I didn't think bodybuilding was ever going to be my thing because at 6'3", I'm pretty sure I'd have to be 300 pounds on stage to look like those guys. So around 2007, I found on the internet a video series that you were in called Life of a Natural Pro that Lane had done with bodybuilding.com. And it was like this weekly little video series where he was coaching Tommy Jeffers. And that's the first time that I remember looking at myself and looking at them and thinking like, well, they look awesome, but I look kind of like that. Like that kind of the mold that I fit into. And so I remember going on the computer, typing in Natural Bodybuilding Florida, finding a show that was 4 hours away. Me and my best friend, Christian, the guy that, I was in the attic lifting weights with, drove to it and watched it. And I remember seeing the guys on stage and being like, they look amazing. And then they would walk by me and they were like 150 pounds. And I'm like, holy cow. So that's really what it was. That's what led me to reach out to Lane. That's what sparked it. I didn't actually get on stage until I was 32. And I'd been in the gym for more than a decade.
And so Lane was already a known quantity, which means I was kind of in the background doing my Natural Bodybuilding Fitness magazine editing and that kind of thing. And you said you remember the episode where he interviewed me. Is that when you? Of
course, you were in there. Jim was in there. Tommy, a lot of the Dave Gooden, a lot of those guys. I remember your episode because you were introduced as like the person who kind of created this approach to flexible dieting and who looked at things differently at a time when it was ridiculous if you didn't cut water and all these things. You were basically saying do the opposite, which I think part of my personality, I like going against the grain. I don't like doing what everyone else is doing. And that sparked my interest as well.
And what's interesting about that, so I'm getting ready to leave, hop on a plane to go speak at a camp. And this is a particular camp series that kind of launched my career 20 some years ago. And I remember this is pre-social media. I could go to these events and I could talk about those things. Here's why water depletion is just not helpful for you. It's why you're going to look worse. Here's what you need to do with sodium instead of depleting sodium. And you would just get those jaw-dropping moments and people would just be shocked. And it was a very interesting, contrarian type way to present information. Well, now with the internet, everybody knows everything. You have access to every bit of information. And so, you go to these things and everybody's looking for something unique. You very, very much evidence-based. I want to know what the latest study is that shows one particular thing. So at the camp you and I met, that was kind of the format. It's let's get people together. Lane was doing his VIP camps and let's present some information. And I do remember you as the van driver. That was you're just Lane's friend. I think you and I even trained legs together, either that time or the next one. And I do very, very distinctly recall, like, this is a good guy. Like, this is somebody, you are not Paul Revelia, the coach yet. Pro Physique did not yet exist. But I thought, man, what a great guy. And you and I have really become great friends ever since.
Yeah, we've spent a few of your birthdays together. I always look forward to when we get to travel together. And, I'll never get tired of saying it, but being friends with you is one of the great honors because, I just admired you so much when I first got into this, that when we actually became friends, it's very exciting. So yeah, that's why I always love, planning to get together.
Well, likewise. And I think, again, it comes to that, Yeah, we're two pretty authentic guys. You know, what you see is what you get. When you were at that particular camp, you were, I think, just starting, maybe not even yet working with clients. That may have come a little bit later, but tell me about that transition into you becoming a coach.
Yeah, it wasn't something that I was even interested in doing. I had competed in 2008 at a show and I won that one. In 2009, I got a natural pro card. And that's when I was posting on the bodybuilding.com forums. And I was literally posting every day, my workouts, pictures, just my story. And I think that kind of started to generate a little bit of interest. Also at that time, Lane was just generating a ton of interest. Like he was, he would tell me that he was so overwhelmed. He didn't even want to open his inbox some days. He was getting so many, coaching requests and requests for his time. And it just so happened that Lane ended up moving to Florida around that time. He graduated from University of Illinois and he had gone to Eckerd, where I live, St. Pete, Tampa area, and decided that Florida was the place for him. So, when he moved here, he had coached me, we had become friends. So we ended up spending a lot of time together. And I just recall he would just always be on his computer. I'd go over to his house to hang out and he's like, oh, I got to answer emails. And I'd be like, all right, that's, kind of lame. But, and then he would just always imply to me like, hey, have you thought about coaching? You love this stuff. And I was like, no, I have a career in IT. I go to the gym for me. I don't do it for other people. And then, over time, he wore me down, in particular with the story of one kid who was like 18 years old, had given a trainer like $500 to do a prep. The guy sent him a cookie cutter meal plan, which, Lane was preaching about at that time. And when the kid questioned this trainer, who was an IFBB pro, well-known guy, he said, well, you're fired and I'm keeping your money. And so the kid was upset. The kid's mom was upset. He didn't know what to do. Lane was like, man, do you think you would help this kid out? And I thought, I'm just going to take the methods that I learned from you. And Lane said, hey, if you have questions, you can ask me. And that to me was the best part, because I'm like, man, I did not feel confident doing it, but I'm like, if Lane can help. So I just did the best I could. Lane helped me along the way. And that kid ended up, I think he won his novice class, might've won like, I forget. He just did well. And I remember his mom giving me a hug after the show. I didn't charge him. I just prepped him. And I just remember his mom gave me a hug after the show and said, thank you so much. My son was so heartbroken when he was, what happened to him. And you've kind of invigorated his love for bodybuilding. And, you made me a believer that this can be a good industry. And I thought, oh, kind of feels good. And, my then girlfriend, now wife, was with me, and she's like, you're good at this. You should do this. And that's probably the first time I thought, oh, maybe I will, and that was, I don't know. That was very early on, 2010, 11, somewhere around there. So, but that was the first client, I guess.
And what a funny thing to consider. First of all, the exact same thing happened to me today. Somebody had an issue with a coach and they had to part ways. And I just literally did the same thing. I don't want to say I'm rescuing this person. I don't want to, take away any dignity there, but you feel for these people in our industry who are chewed up and spit out by just the disinformation, misinformation, the way that people just get churned through. And I have to say, with my own origin story, because there was no template, there was no business model, I found myself swept up much the same way as Lane. So I end up with 200, 250, 300 clients at a time, 20 to 30 people competing every weekend. And I had to rearrange my entire business around that. It was never an intentional business model. And then at one point, I just thought, this is not going to last. Bodybuilding is dying. This was right before Men's Physique was coming out, Figure was coming out. And I just saw bodybuilding in general just, on the decline. And I just stepped away. I just took some of our licensed owners as coaches, and I just started focusing on the general population aspects of our business. But then along comes you. Lane was obviously the catalyst for really taking this into social media in that era. And then, people like Ryan Doris, Eric Helms, and, Berto and all those people. But you quickly emerged kind of through your own path. And this is why I think you're one of the biggest influences today. At some point, you decided, okay, if I'm going to do this as a career, I'm going to do some things maybe differently structurally. I'm going to market, advertise, create content in different ways. So what were some of the earliest things you did very intentionally to build the career you have now?
Well, the first thing I had was a ton of imposter syndrome, right? So, I'm getting clients that I'm literally looking at them going, why do they want me to coach them? What is it about me? Like, I didn't even feel worthy. So, I really made it my goal to attend and be a part of many of these events as I could, to get around people like you, like Dr. Campbell, Dr. Zoros, Dom, anybody that I felt had some information that could help me be a better coach. I found out that Dr. Campbell had a exercise science program at University of South Florida. I signed up for a few different online nutrition courses and certifications. And, I just kind of went down the education rabbit hole. But the biggest thing I wanted to do was, I had an experience of online coaching with Lane, and that experience for the time was probably good. But Lane was also very short with me in emails, didn't answer my questions. I also didn't always feel like he read and understood what I was asking. So I thought, if I'm going to be a coach, I can't, Lane's up on a stratosphere that, I cannot treat my people the same way that he does and get away with it. So I thought, I have to take this and improve this process. And I also realized, I like people. I love talking to people. So, I implemented phone calls with all my prospective clients, which sounded scary to me. I thought, man, I'm going to spend all this time on the phone with someone and they might not even be my client. But that quickly became what made me love what I do, because I got to know them as people. I got to know their goals. I became invested in their careers, their families, their kids. And so I think what I became known as was somebody that was very attentive, replied very quickly. I had a career in IT at the time, so I was literally on my computer all day. So, my thought was, let's look at opportunities as technology emerges on how we can do things differently. And the biggest by far was when the technology for video responses came out. That I don't want to say I was the first, but I believe I was the first person at scale to send a video to every client every week. And I want that to be the industry standard, or beyond. But currently I think I'm just always looking for if I can provide a little extra value.
Mm-hmm. By the way, what is that statue behind you? I don't think I've ever noticed that before.
So this one right here?
No, the large, like full size one.
The Rock?
Yeah. Oh, that's Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
Yeah, it's like a life-size pop-up of The Rock. Someone got me that for Christmas, probably my wife.
That is awesome.
For like the first month that it was in here, I would open the door and like get startled.
So you start creating a little bit more of a customer service oriented model, which I think is great. You're right. When I was, the technology wasn't there when I was doing this. And that's one of the things that kind of burned me out is I just felt like I was not able to give the kind of service I wanted. And I didn't like to turn people away, but I thought, I just can't do this at this level anymore. You also created the whole video thing. Tell me the year and maybe the influence of why you started creating the video.
I remember it super clear. It's 2018 North Americans. You were there. I think I had 25 girls competing. And after the show, we were all sitting around and laughing and talking. And one of the girls says, Coach, the other day I thought you were mad at me. And then all the other girls chimed in. Yeah. Are you mad at us? And, they were joking because they were high on carbs. And I was like, what do you mean? They're like, well, sometimes in your emails, you're short with us. And I thought, okay, well, give me an example. And they said the situation. I said, okay, this week we're going to make this adjustment. And, here's the changes. And I was like, yeah, that sounds like a perfectly reasonable response to the fact that we're stalled. And yeah, but it sounds like you're mad. And in my brain, I don't think like a female, or I don't know. I just looked at the words and thought, no, I gave you the information. You go ahead and run with it. And so they jokingly said, well, sometimes, text can seem, their experience was like, oh, is he mad? Is he angry? And I thought there's got to be a way around this, because they don't know how happy I am. Like I'm proud of them. And then I had a client send me a video one day. She sent me a video, and I remember looking at the video product, and it was called BombBomb, .com. And I thought, what is this? It's in my email. And I literally went to their website, signed up for it that day, and it plugged right into my Outlook. I love Outlook. I don't use Gmail. And Gmail now has like a Loom product, but this BombBomb was the first built in. So I can literally open up an email and click record faster than I can type now. Mm-hmm. And that immediately changed everything. Again, I thought, oh man, how am I going to scale this? There's no way I can send videos to all my clients every week. Immediately, the feedback was, thank you, coach. I appreciate it. And it just gave them a sense of where I was coming from, because I would say, hey, great job this week, which you don't always type as much as you emote. Mm-hmm. You know, they can see my hand motions. They can see my face. So yeah, it was definitely 2018. And I mean, yeah, like I just wish it was available sooner, and who knows what's available next. Maybe next time we'll be in the metaverse in the room, sitting down, talking to each other.
Right. So when did you start creating your video content on YouTube? Because I think that was a game changer. You know, as I have seen different platforms come and go, it's always a matter of who gets there first and kind of fills that space initially. And that creates a big market share capitalization. And you did that, I think, in YouTube better than anybody. So when did you start that?
Well, when I started YouTube in 2010, 2009, it was a long time. You know, it was literally for me to play guitar and like, I mean, I had some like softball videos. I just had random stuff. I thought it would be a personal diary. When I'm like 100 years old, I'm going to be able to look at these videos. And then I started going on there looking up fitness content. And then when I started coaching, I remember my clients would ask me questions that I could not find on YouTube. Hey, coach, why do we do refeeds? And I'd go on YouTube and I'd be like, wait a minute, why am I going to send somebody a video of another coach talking about something? So I thought, well, I'll just send them a video on YouTube, because that was the only tool available at that time. It never occurred to me that people were searching for things that I was posting about. Mm-hmm. I would post my workouts. I would post, the first YouTube person, Scott Hermanson. I mean, I wish I would have thought, he was the first guy that had like how to do a lat pull down. That video has like 5 million views. If you do a video now called how to do a lat pull down, it'll get 4 views, right? Mm-hmm. Because the platform has progressed so much. So I do think I'm kind of clever in like looking at people's behaviors, looking at technology and going, what are they going to do next? I'm kind of clever in that way. So I thought, okay, I obviously have a very small YouTube channel. How can I grow? And I call it micro content. I can't do a video on how to do a lat pull down. There's already 10 videos with tens of millions of views on that, IFBB giant guys. So I started doing content around things that we were discussing, things that were kind of forward thinking as far as the evidence-based world is concerned. Talking about, I think I'm pretty sure I have the first ever video on diet break. I wanted to put it out for that reason. I thought, historically speaking, people are going to be like, oh, diet breaks, because they're the greatest thing for fat loss ever. And people were not even doing them years ago, and people still aren't even doing them. So like, I thought, I'm going to put this stuff out on YouTube that it's not going to get a lot of views today or tomorrow, but one of these days someone's going to type in, what is a refeed? What is a diet break? And I want to be that. And so I've hit it on a couple topics, and that's the way YouTube is. There's the videos are called evergreen, mm-hmm. meaning if you get in the top 2 or 3 for a search for a term, you're golden. And I have 4 or 5 videos like that. So I still do my micro content. I have a few videos that have done well, but I just want to provide something that people need. And I really enjoy that. And I always just stick to being me. I don't try to sound smarter than I am. I try to explain it on their level. And if it's something I don't understand, I reach out to you so I understand it better. And then I can explain what linear loading is. So, yeah.
Well, that type of mindset that you want to be somebody who disseminates information to people so it's usable, you're underselling yourself a little bit. You do have an IT background. You got an MBA. You're in kind of an academic role, I would think, but maybe just a little bit tangent to bodybuilding. But at some point, I don't know if this was a conscious decision again for just business acumen, but did you say, I'm going to specialize? Because I mean, you are known as a bikini prep coach more than anything. Yeah. You have a lot of coaches now who do other things, but did you specifically at one point say, I'm going to specialize because this is just the right thing to do as a career?
I fought it. Really did. Because I could have said, I want to be the best natural bodybuilding coach in the world. I was on the cusp of that. I had, Ray winning a world championship. I had a bikini competitor win a world I could have just focused only on natural bodybuilding. And the sport of bikini kind of just fell in my lap. And even just saying the word bikini, it implies like something sexual or feminine, but it's just, to me, bikini is the greatest female natural bodybuilding sport there is. And so it's just taken a life of its own. And I'm the kind of person, I just start to get obsessive about things. I have to know the whys. And when you start to become kind of an expert in one area, it makes sense to focus on that. You just become better at it. And so, as ridiculous as this sentence sounds, I wanted to become the world's best expert in the bikini division. I started attending seminars based around bikini. I started reaching out to the judges to get their feedback. I don't have an ego when it comes to this stuff. If I see somebody having better results than me, I want to know why. I want to know what those coaches are doing. And I incorporate that stuff into my approach. Whereas I think a lot of coaches go, no, my way is the best way. That's how we do it. That's why I win. Realizing that the reason people are good coaches is mostly the athletes. They get the benefit of coaching. It just so happens if you get really good at coaching, the good athletes start to look at what your stuff. They start to listen to you and they start to reach out to you. Now I have the clientele to match my history. The bikini division to me is it's just happened because I'm very good at paying attention to that specific thing, how to build muscle, how to get stage lean, and how to take care of an athlete. Because I think women more than men get damaged from improper preps. Men have this ability to go, prep's over, I don't care if I gain 20 or 30 pounds. Women will do damage to themselves by trying to stay stage lean, binging, purging, these terrible traits. Whereas I think I've found a method where we can prep healthy. I know I have, and still be happy in the improvement season. So yeah, I feel like I found a bit of a calling. It just sounds weird to say that, but it's, it just feels right.
Well, I do think, and I teach this all the time to the coaches I'm mentoring in business, creating their own careers and brands. It is counterintuitive to specialize, to say, I'm going to say no to all of this and only yes to this. But not only do you become intuitively better, the more experience you have working with that one population in that one division, it really does create what you just said, this tidal wave of business that then can create other orbits, because now you have a lot of coaches. You work, general population people see your content and they're like, well, if he can do that with, an Olympia athlete, certainly can do that with me. And so in a very, again, counterintuitive way, you just grow larger by intentionally focusing on something smaller.
Yeah. And I do make an effort to still talk about other topics. I realize that bikini's not, broad, but it is, a proper way to lose fat, maintain it, and reach your physique goals. And, you and I know this, like most clients reach out to a coach and say, I want to look like a competitor, but I don't want to compete. Mm-hmm. But you and I both know that nobody's ever going to look as good as a competitor unless they compete. 1 in a million will actually go through that process. So there is that back and forth, but I found the same thing to be true. The other day, I had a gentleman last year win a natural Olympia Masters title, and I had to tell him I can't coach him this year. And that it's gut wrenching to me because I loved coaching him and I want him to win another world title. And, that feels great. But at the same time, that's just going to take my focus off of what I'm building with my focus right now on this bikini division. And so, it gets harder and harder to be niched, but it's just easier in the long run because now my training programs, my thought processes. So I've also invented a product that's coming out this year. Wouldn't have been possible if I was focused on all these things. I just noticed something that was missing and it's about to come out, and I'll tell you about it off air. But, when you really, I love Gary Vee when he talks about this, when you focus on, he calls it the dirt in the clouds, when you're in the dirt. And for a coach, and you've seen it 100 times, you build a little bit of a following as a coach. Now you're an influencer and you stop doing the things that coaches do. I'm backstage at every freaking show. I'm obsessed with coaching still. I haven't lost that at all. In fact, if anything, it's just, there's more fuel on the fire than ever. You notice and see things when you're in the dirt that other people don't see, that are just casual coaches, right? And so I'm still just very obsessive about the coaching at this point.
And that's what I want to ask you as another level of specialization, because I would say 3 or 4 times distinctly, I've come back to this in my life to realize, what is it that I love to do? What am I, not only what am I best at, but what do I love? And from the time I was in my 20s until now, I keep coming back to just the word clinician. Sometimes I get a little jealous of my friends who are doing research. And I think, well, maybe I should do that. Maybe I'll just, kind of leave this behind. And I'm going to go teach at a university. And I want to do that. That sounds so fun. And then I think, and maybe I should do this. Maybe I should get back into the physical therapy world and do that. And, or strength, performance stuff. I love the whole conversation we have right now, all about duration, frequency, intensity, all of those things. And I'm like, gosh, I do my best work when I'm one-on-one with a client. And that's why after 20 years of even stepping away from having my own facility, I've recreated a new headquarters in Evansville, Indiana, because I want to be where I have staff and trainers and people come into a building and I see that life and that energy. So I'm curious, when you say that you are a coach and you want to stay there, especially using that Gary Vaynerchuk language of staying in the dirt, what does that mean for you for the next 5, 10, or 15 years? How do you grow a business around you where you still sit there behind curtains at contests?
Well, the biggest thing is to realize is that, being a competition prep coach is a lot of my weekends are going to be at shows. My wife and I discuss, I'm going to be at potentially 30 to 40 shows this year. So there's a lot of travel involved in that. The other side of that coin is when I'm home, I'm home. I work from home. I'm at my house. So it's a unique situation where when I'm home, I can do content that's built around the general population questions. I myself am going to be competing and getting on stage again. That gives me a lot of creative juices. That gets me in the moment thinking about, okay, what did I do differently with my diet this year, with my cardio, the things that I've learned or the things that I love to share. So while I have kind of a specific coaching goal and I love being at the shows, I still also have these personal things that I love to do and talk about. And it right now, it just blends very well for me. I don't feel like there's a conflict at all. There's two sides to me, prep coach, and then the bro in me that still wants to put on muscle at 46 years old and, put on tanning oil and, maybe you'll be there this year again. So
Absolutely. You got to let me know, man. I'll be back there with you.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's really what drives me right now is the idea of opportunity. And then also I have an amazing team around me, hiring Stephen Beaugrand, having my wife come on board with Pro Physique. I let go of all those job roles. I don't do invoicing. I don't do inquiries. I don't do technology. I don't do our website. I literally just work on my emails, make some YouTube videos, respond to Instagram stuff, go to shows. And now that I have that freedom, I was in the way of growth. Whereas now we literally have, 30 employees dedicated to certain roles. Some are coaches, some are website developers, so once you get that stuff behind you, now it's just for me to continue doing what I'm doing and just let nature take its course. So that's really the what's allowed me to be a better coach, was not doing all the other things that, as an online coach, when you get good, you almost become more focused on business than coaching. Like there's a breaking point where you're like, man, what do I do here? And we've seen a lot of well-known coaches, Lane included, just go, I'm not coaching anymore. I'm doing business stuff. But I just love coaching. Like I could do that, but I just love coaching.
And that's so important. And that's why I came back to my example of being in that clinical mindset, because even now, as I mentor coaches and, creating the National Academy of Metabolic Science and the Nutrition Coaching Global Mastermind and Apex Coach, all these different things, it's still an extension where when you look at my role and all of those things, I'm teaching people how to be better clinicians. I'm all about building that clinical experience, that relationship between a client and a coach, and even just the standards of practice that our career, our occupation just completely lacks. Like we're inventing this as we go. And that's a big part of what I think my role is now. Having been somebody who saw the very birth of it accidentally, and now I also see, besides those normal business cycles that you're describing that we all kind of go through, that the growth pains of an industry. And not only does an industry have a typical cycle that it goes through, and I think we're in a very catabolic one now where so many people jumped into the swimming pool that there are a lot of people starving and dying through attrition. But then you have all the technological changes, you have the cultural changes. So you being in it now for more than 10 years, I think beyond just your development and perspective, you have to have seen some major shifts and cycles in how business is done in general. And what are you seeing now for where our coaching industry is? Where does a coach thrive in trying to become somebody with their own unique brand?
I mean, I'd probably have to think about all the top coaches. There's a lot of branding that goes on. And when I think about, the careers, I think a lot of people now are looking at it education first. I know a lot of people that are registered dietitians that are going to school to study exercise science. I know we have 4 or 5 coaches on our staff that have master's degree in exercise science. Bill Campbell does a lot of physique enhancement work at his grad program. So there's a lot of that. But I also sadly see the thing that you and I will often joke about is the how to build your fit biz to $100,000 in 6 months with our program. And it's essentially just how to be a good salesman, how to market yourself versus the more organic approach, which, I have mixed emotions on because I did it one way, but at the same time, if I was 22 in college and I wanted to be a coach right now, I'd probably get sucked into that. And you and I have seen people get sucked into that, but a lot of people want to be coaches because of the financial aspect. They think, wow, you can work from home and make a lot of money. But I don't think many people realize how demanding coaching is. And if it's not something you love, you will burn out so fast. It's very demanding. You've got to be invested in people. I consider myself someone who is highly emotionally intelligent. I understand people's emotions and feelings just about better than anybody I've ever met. And that's a weird thing to say, but it's taken me like 40 something years to realize what that even is. Let's say I'm in a restaurant with my kids. I'm more aware of the people around us than my own family. I'm like, how are my kids impacting these people's days? And it's the same thing with me. When I think of a client, I'm wondering how my behavior is impacting them. If I make a post about another client, if I don't answer their email in a certain amount of time, like I'm very aware of that stuff. So I think I just have always kind of held myself to a very high standard. I don't see all the other coaches doing that. It's tough for me because there are a lot of coaches doing great things out there, but from when you started, I think you would have thought it would have gotten further by now. The barrier to entry to coaching right now is pretty low. You can be a snake oil salesman and sleazy and have one well-known client and just thrive, right?
Yeah, for sure.
It's a little bit tricky, but when people ask me like, well, how do you feel about the fact that, when you started, there was like 10 coaches and now there's like tens of thousands. And I said, well, the cream rises. You're getting people that are interested in coaching, getting a bad coach. The first thing they do is ask their friend go on the internet and say, hey, who are the good coaches? Guess who shows up? The good coaches, right? So there's a common theme, and there's a reason why Steven does such a good job with Pro Physique with keeping our standards so high. We make all of our coaches go through your training platform. We make all of our coaches go through our personal philosophies. They have to understand this is the way we do things, and we don't just bring on coaches because we need them. We bring on coaches because they fit our philosophies.
Well, what you're describing is exactly what I tell coaches who come to me to help with their careers. And I will tell people all the time, you can definitely churn through some big numbers if you're just willing to put up pictures of yourself naked. And if you have abs and biceps and all of that stuff, you definitely do not need that master's degree. But if you really want a career that lasts and you want a career that matters, that you can be proud of, then there is, as you said, this organic element where you have to be willing to say, I'm going to build this one good client experience at a time. And, I go back to even my own beginnings 30 years ago, and I never set out to do any of this stuff. I was just a physical therapist who bought a gym, started adding nutrition programming to it, got my pro card, started writing for magazines. And then as somebody who had the education plus the pro status and some of my own ideals and ideas that were a little bit contrarian to those peaking methods we were talking about earlier, And there was never any direction to it. There was never any master plan. It was just authentically taking care of people one at a time. And I do know what you're saying, Paul. And that is, I think we agree, the future, but for fewer people, because you do have those people swooping in, like the snake oil salesman, the hawks who take a big part of the market share. But if you have the resilience and you have the patience to do that just by being, as I said, the first time I saw you driving the van, that's when we met. I'm like, that's a good guy. Like, I think that is your specialty. When you say that you have a high emotional intelligence, that is your brand. So when I say brand, I don't mean sleazy, like let's hide behind something that's a facade. I mean,
Sure.
something you truly breathe and live and that is authentic to you. And, I would say from both looking inside of your life and from the outside as just a consultant, that's why you're successful. You are that guy.
Yeah, I think you don't realize what you're good at until other people tell you. When I started making YouTube videos, I didn't understand why they were doing well, but I think I'm good at sensing what people are interested in and relaying that information. And that's a skill. You don't think of being able to speak, on camera as a skill, but I've had some people that are amazing coaches and amazing physiques and say, "Hey, let's do a video." And then you put them on camera and you're like, "Man, this will not get watched." So, there's definitely some unique skills that come with being a coach. Now, you don't have to have a good personality to be a coach. Everyone has their kind of specialties. I don't like writing. I have tried so many times to do projects together where you're like, "Hey, just write me a paragraph." Man, I cannot write. I don't know what that specific skill is, on my brain. Meanwhile, you've probably written 30 novels
You
on
have
the
to be an
topics.
introvert. That's why you're so great, being out there. It's just total difference.
Yeah. So, yeah, but Lane likes to write too. So I don't know if it's as hard for him as it was for me, but one of the first things that Lane was able to do for me is he had bodybuilding.com and Muscular Development reach out to me to write articles and get paid. He's like, "This is how you can build your career." So I did it, but I hated every second of it. So the second I didn't have to do that, I stopped.
Well, now you don't have to because the video medium has kind of taken over.
Yeah, and podcasting and the spoken word is the most powerful thing now because people have access to it at all times, riding in their car, driving to work, in the gym, working out. So many people will be like, "Yeah, I listen to your podcast while I work out." Like,
Mhm.
oh, that's awesome, so
Absolutely. So let's flash forward. You and I are in our 60s sitting on the beach, and we're looking back saying, okay, this is the occupation that we forged, and now we've seen it grow this far. What do you think it's going to be like in, let's say, 20 years? And how are you making that happen?
yeah. So I've always been pretty good at looking at what's coming, what's going to change, how am I going to make sure that my career is safe, right? So in grad school, getting your master's in business, they call it a SWOT analysis. You got to look at your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats. So I'm always like, what are the threats to my job? Well, usually it's when a client reaches out to me and says, "Hey, coach, I no longer want to be your client." Okay, why? "I found someone in my hometown that has a really good team and I want someone local." That's really the biggest threat to an online coach. Now, when you and I started, there were no good coaches in person or online. I mean, there were few and far between. Like when I told you, like Lane was getting like 50 client requests a day. I'm sure you went through periods where you were just literally open up your inbox and it's like, oh my gosh. So it's still kind of that way. But I think what's going to happen over time is, you coached Lane, Lane coached me, I've coached these coaches. Now I have 23 coaches under me. They're going to have influence on people. And I think what's going to happen eventually is, I'm thinking it's going to be a local coach with a small footprint, a studio style gym, which is why I opened mine, because now you can have impact on people on a broad spectrum, but also build the culture around something local. And I think you're going to start seeing these things pop up in different cities, larger cities first. Obviously, I own Tampa, but there's even other good coaches in Tampa that I'm aware of, right? And so you're starting to see this in different locations, like, oh, this team is in this location and there's a good culture around that. So I think that's the future of coaching, is it's going to go from being an online to an in-person, where people are going to start to gravitate to, I think one thing that's really allowed me to grow as a coach is people love our culture. Girls love to be a part of our team because they support each other. We go to the events together. We travel together. Our coaches are there. So I think that's probably what I see happening in the next 10 to 15 years. Having a physical presence, as well as being able to put content online for people to find you. And, I'm still going to have a good online presence. But if you don't have someone that's local to you that you have faith in, you're going to work with me. I'm actually starting to now build a local talent pool, which I never had before.
I could not agree more. And it's, I think a lot of my Apex coaches watch this are going to be laughing because they're like, yeah, Joe's been telling me that for years. But here's the irony. I read about that as a business principle 30 years ago in Club Industry Magazine. And this predates, and I'm going to show you how these kind of trends impact different industries. This predates CrossFit. And what they were saying back then, because this was the era of the lifetime fitness brands of people who were opening 110,000 square foot facilities and trying to have everything for everyone. And they said the future is in the small boutique shop where that trainer, that nutrition coach, they didn't call them nutrition coaches back then, could be the one-stop shop for everybody. It was the third space. It was the place to get all of your needs met. And so that happened, in the last 15 to 18 years, there have been, I think, up to $15 billion flowing through functional fitness facilities, CrossFit boxes, to the tune of only a 2% failure rate, where the reverse almost happens with gyms, a 98% failure rate. And now that has cycled all the way to personal nutrition coaching for the exact same reason. Whether you're a general population client or you're a fitness competitor, everybody does prefer to have that place where they can connect. So I think you're completely right on the money. I remember you and I talked about this a few years ago too, where, I don't think you had this space yet, but I was saying, hey, you should probably become a Diet Doc license owner, and I can help you create that presence in Tampa.
Yeah, I mean, that was something that my wife and I went back and forth on so many times, trying to figure out, if that license was the best thing for us. Ultimately, we didn't decide to go that route, but the idea was so sound that I understood where your licensees were coming from. I just felt my momentum was enough that it wasn't going to necessarily benefit me. But now that we are getting, so the next step for our business is we're getting a private space in a commercial gym that's got 40,000 square feet. So I'm going from having 2,000 square feet to now I'm going to be able to offer contest prep services inside of a 40,000 square foot facility with a physical therapist, with CrossFit, with bodybuilding, with MMA. So we'll see how that experiment goes. I'm open to whatever's approach is best. But I also want to start doing more of these seminars and events to bring people in, because that's really how you grow your local culture, is around just getting people in. So that's going to be this next year for us, is going to be developing that in-person touch.
So with that being the near future, where do you think your career ends? If we look at that last chapter, you're about ready to hand the keys off to somebody, here's Pro Physique. What do you want this next 15 to 20 year run to look like?
Yeah, I think, when I think of the future of Pro Physique, Steven's a big part of it. He's been someone that's helped me get it off the ground. If I do start to want to travel a little bit less, my kids are now 7 and 3, and we even have a 1-year-old. So like, as that time, the weekends become more important to me, I may want to be a fewer shows, take on fewer clients. So I'll probably put more emphasis on growing our coaching staff, being more hands-on with them, and see if, somebody like Steven, or, we have some other superstar coaches that are just growing exponentially, and maybe could take over my spot and kind of be the face of the business. But I don't know that I'll ever completely just retire and walk away. I liked how you've evolved. There's been many times where I thought, okay, Joe's already been through this, and what's he doing now? And I look at what you're doing and what you're thinking about, and continuing to give back. I think I'll continue to evolve and grow on the whatever media platforms are allowing us to put out content. I've tried TikTok. I don't really find it productive, but in my mind, YouTube has not slowed down. Of all the platforms, MySpace and Facebook and they kind of come and go. YouTube has just been on this rise, and so I think I kind of got lucky in that it's such like a meritocracy, YouTube. Doesn't matter what color you are, doesn't matter how old you are. It just matters if people like your information and want to hear it from you, you'll build a following. Um, and so I think I'll just continue to evolve on there and see where it takes me. I mean, I still have some career goals I want to reach as far as like coaching. I'd like to win an Olympia, some of these kind of things. And I'm gonna keep fighting for those. So yeah, my retirement, I think like you, I'd like to be involved, even if it's a more personal, hands-on. Even if I'm working with fewer competitors, but they're coming into the gym, I'm helping them train, I'm working on their posing in person, maybe just going to a few key shows a year, something like that. That sounds fun to me. The real thing that's been fun for me about being a coach the last 3-4 years, I've traveled to cities that I never would have probably traveled to in my life. And I've really enjoyed getting to see cities like Chattanooga, Tennessee. We've all, we're familiar with Las Vegas, Los Angeles, New York City, but I traveled to cities, South Carolina. I'd never been to Charleston before. I've been there like 5 times the last 2 years. What a wonderful place. So I'd like to think, hey, me and my wife can pick up the kids and we can go spend a week in a fun city while I do my job, so there are some awesome benefits to it.
As a poor kid whose family used to have to dig through the couch cushions just to get gas money to see if we could go to town, I'm the same way. At one point, I started making a list of all the cities that I've been to through my career. It's humbling, and that truly is one of the best things. It's meeting those people, seeing those places. I love just walking around a city I've never been in, and I'm just so starry eyed. It's amazing. But when my oldest child, and I have 4, was 12. That's when I looked at the things you just described. And I thought, I was preparing for what I thought might be my last contest season. And part of it was because with kids in Little League and doing these things, I just thought, this is more important to me. And you and I have talked about this in the past, but you had a phenomenal relationship with your father, which is not always a common thing, as did I. And that cemented in me those values that I could say no to opportunity. I had different rules I would set on myself for, how and when I would travel and what I would do in my career. And at that point, when I just looked at this one particular summer where I thought I'm getting too much obsessed with my prep and I'm fatigued and I'm going through all that stuff, that I was saying no to my children, that's the last time I ever competed. And it was easy for me to make that decision because my family meant more to me. My role as a father meant more to me. So knowing that you had that great relationship with your father and now you have 3 children, I'd love to hear just one final question about how you see your career impacting them in a positive way, and how you may be cognitively keeping them away from any negative impacts you may see.
Yeah, I think the obvious one is the financial benefit. Like you said, you've been able to travel and do things that you never thought possible. Now, my father was a firefighter. My mom was a secretary growing up. So, we weren't well off, but it's not like I wanted for anything. I had a bike, I had toys, and I never flew on an airplane or did any of that stuff when I was young, but I just don't think that was common in the 80s. So, I never thought of myself as not having things growing up, but the lifestyle that I've been able to provide for my family, my kids have traveled and done things that, my wife, for my 7-year-old's birthday, they flew to North Carolina to go see a concert that he was Imagine Dragons. He wanted to go see them. So I'm like, man, I can't even remember my first concert. I was in my 20s, right? The first time I flew, I was in my 20s probably, so, we're going to be able to provide things financially for the kids, which also presents some problems because I don't want them to grow up little assholes who think that, they own the world. But the other side of that is what I really see from my kids, that they're going to see what I'm doing. They see that I'm up before them, that I put them to bed and I go back to work. They see me working out, whether it's in the garage. They see the level of effort that I put into everything that I do. They see that I go back to school to study. So I just want, that's what I remember the most about my dad. My dad was always working. He was a firefighter and had 2 other full-time jobs. He worked at a lumber yard, and he worked, odds and ends jobs all the time. He was constantly working, saving, putting money away. I never heard my dad say a bad word about anybody else. I never heard my dad made an excuse. My dad never let me, buy something that we couldn't afford. Like the values that were so annoying when I was young literally became who I am. And I'm so grateful because you don't realize when you're young how terrible some other kids have it, or, and I mean, yeah, so that's why I'm so grateful for my dad, because the values that he instilled in me were just, I don't know if they were ahead of his time, but like it's rare to hear somebody that has never complained. I've never heard my dad complain. If something's not working, he'll say, good, let's figure out how to make it work. Like that's his attitude, not, oh, it's the government's fault that I can't do this. And he's never complained. The answer is always simply, let's just work and make it happen. So, that's the kind of stuff that I want my kids to see. How I'm going to do that, I'm just going to allow my, my natural instincts to take over. No one gives you parenting lessons. I definitely hear my voice coming out of, my dad's voice coming out of my head a lot now that my 7-year-old is getting yelled at sometimes. But the most important thing is that I'm there for them. They understand that they have to be good people. Especially when we're not around, we expect them to hold a standard. And the evolution of education and our society and these gender role things, I mean, these are all challenges that we're facing together, but I think my wife and I are on the same page in that stuff, and that's really helpful. And so far, I gotta say, they're great kids, so I'm very happy.
The fact that you can articulate that many values and such strong ties to them is, again, why I have to come back to my attraction to you as a person at that camp was, this is a good guy. That's what you bring to this sport. That's why I love the fact that we have such a strong friendship and that you're one of the biggest founding influences in the sport. So Paul Revelia, thank you so much for your time and letting me make you part of the canon of history for nutrition coaching.
And I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm glad to be here. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Paul.